Welcome to the Mullin' It Over podcast with Reverend Jack Mullins and Austin Covey.
So earlier we made a Star Wars reference, and my girlfriend and I last night, we were eating dinner together and we were watching Star Wars because I'm a nerd and I'm slowly turning her into a nerd.
Bless her.
Yeah, I know. It's a rough road for her, but she's coming along with it nicely, I guess I would say. She's embracing her inner nerd nice. But we're watching the Clone Wars animated series, which for any of you who know or don't know, that's the animated series that was made by Lucasfilm to bridge the gaps between episodes 2 and 3. So episode 2, the movie, is the Clone Wars. Episode 3 is Revenge of the Sith. And that's sort of the storyline of the actual Clone Wars that's in between the two. And there's, we're towards one of the later seasons. I don't remember which season we're on, but it's towards the end. And spoiler alert, if you don't know this, spoiler alert, I'm sure everybody does. Who cares, though? Darth Maul gets cut in half in episode 1 by Obi-Wan Kenobi. He does not die. Somehow his legs get chopped off, but he survives. He has ended up on this sort of junk planet and built himself some robotic legs, and he is able to move around now. And his brother comes to find him, and he is not mentally in a good place. He is just... It's the voice actor is named Sam Witwer, I believe is his name, who does the voice acting for Darth Maul in the series. And he plays possibly the best psychotic role. I mean, like when you think about like the Joker, different people who have like lost their marbles, so to speak. In my opinion, this particular episode or segment of him portraying Darth Maul is one of the better jobs of acting I've ever seen.
Okay. Thought it was a cartoon.
It is, but just the voice acting part of it, because Mark Hamill, who played Luke Skywalker, did the voice acting for the Joker in the Batman animated series for years.
I did not know that.
Mark Hamill did a lot of voice acting outside of his physical acting. He did a lot of voice acting, and he was the voice actor for the Joker for years and years and years in the Batman animated series.
I did not know that, nor did I care.
So, but Whitwer's portrayal, the vocal portrayal of sort of this guy who's very mentally broken and has lost his marbles is very good. But Darth Maul's just kind of rambling, and he says something. And Alexa, my girlfriend, is not a big enough nerd to have picked up on this, but I caught it as being part of the Sith code. He's reciting part of the Sith code. And I said something to her about it, so it sparked a conversation. And Star Wars tends to lean into the mysticism a little bit, right? You have the light side and the dark side and the Force and all these things. And so we looked up the Sith code, and because she didn't know it, because she's not a nerd, I understand. And the Sith code is: peace is a lie, there is only passion. Through passion I gain strength, through strength I gain power, and through power I gain victory. Through victory my chains are broken. And it prompted kind of an interesting conversation between us, and you and I were having this conversation a little bit earlier about how in modern society we talk a lot about following your passion or having a passion, and we talk in a spiritual sense a lot about breaking your chains or that kind of thing. And it's so I think it's kind of a interesting thing to think about, because in the sense of Star Wars with the Sith, they are attempting to break their own chains, versus we tend to look at God or Jesus, however you want to couch that, as being the one who sets us free. And so we are placing our faith in another versus placing our faith in ourselves and our own lust for power or our own capacity to free ourselves. But it's also interesting, sort of an ideological difference between those two is the Jedi in the story follow the will of the Force, right? And you hear this in Christianity a lot, right? We seek to follow the will of God, whereas the Sith seek to bend the Force to their will. So they have a personal goal or achievement or thing they want to accomplish, and they seek to bend the Force to their will to accomplish the goal. And it's interesting to me because in the portrayal of the Sith in Star Wars, they are portrayed very evil, right? Like Darth Vader's all dressed in black. He's kind of machine, kind of man. Darth Maul's all tattooed up. He's black and red face with horns coming out of his head, right? Like they're made to look very evil, but reflecting that to modern Christianity, we can see churches who, or or religious schools of thought, churches, I don't want to say entire denominations maybe, but who tend to lean into that, trying to bend theology or bend what the Bible says to fit what they're trying to accomplish, more so than seeking the will of God, seeking to understand what the Bible says. It's like you said earlier about how different people will pick and choose different things to reinforce kind of what they're saying. It's bending what is there to fit what I want to reinforce, versus instead of litmus testing, am I on the right path, right? Am I seeking the will of God? Am I trying to do what would be right in the eyes of God? It's, this is what I want, so I'm going to try to bend what I think God is saying to. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and one of the ironies of the whole conversation is everyone is right based on their perspective.
Yes.
The one who is so rigid that he or she cannot see any variation from that path in their heart is just as right as the person who sees it in a much different framework. Like I've said before, the Pharisees were not evil in and of themselves. They were simply trying to protect their faith as they understood it, as they knew how. It was at cross purposes with the force, the will of God, if I may. And so they found themselves in trying to protect their faith at being at cross purposes with what God's design was.
Sometimes I think about this too, and this was one of the conversations between she and I last night, is in America and in Texas where we are so heavily self-reliant, and we really pride ourselves in that, almost to a fault sometimes, that I think that's right, because that's the thing about the Sith code is an attempt to free oneself. Right, it's the last of it is the Force shall set me free, but it's not that the Force shall set me free, it's what I am able to accomplish by bending the Force shall set me free, right? Like my achievement of power or status or whatever. And so we tend to be so self-reliant, we try to bend the situation. We are determined to free ourselves as opposed to believing in God, putting our faith in God, attempting to follow the path of God. We like to have the control. And ultimately that is what the Sith part is about, is control versus Yoda says that, I think in episode 3, you have to let go of all the things you fear to lose.
Yeah.
And the Sith is sort of the opposite. They're trying to bend the will of something to not lose it.
Yeah.
And I think, we become so enamored with self-reliance and self-accomplishment, and also with the stuff we get from that it's very easy, like you hear the, what is the term, prophet gospel? That's not the right word. What's the right word?
I know
if I
what you're
hadn't
talking
asked
about.
Phooey. But just kind of the, God
prosperity
yeah,
gospel.
There you go. Kind of the prosperity gospel, which there's, I maybe don't understand the theology behind the prosperity gospel well enough, but I don't see Jesus riding on the finest horse available. He rode a donkey. When he rode one, typically he walked. He didn't own a house, let alone 5. It's like we want the material thing so badly that we're willing to try to bend our theology to fit the desire to have the material things.
Right. And I think that's a real challenge. And I see that played out most frequently when people become enamored of a personality. Because I think you tend to see that in your television evangelists and your mega church pastors who become so identified with it, and then if you just believe the way brother so-and-so preaches the gospel, God will bless you. God will give you anything you want.
Mm-hmm.
And you commented about the theology of the prosperity gospel. And my initial reaction was, what theology?
Well, and I understand that. I'm hesitant to take too many shots at something I don't fully understand.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's my gut reaction too. But I don't know everything, right? And so I don't necessarily want to stand here and fire off at something when and I'm not saying that they are lying. The saying is even a lie begins with a grain of truth, or even a lie
Sure.
contains a grain of truth. So you can particularly mapped over a really long distance or a really long amount of time, 1 or 2 degrees off at the beginning can ultimately lead to vastly different places.
Sure.
So not knowing the roots that it came from, I don't want to heavily criticize it too much.
I understand.
I don't relate to it. I don't get it. But that doesn't mean it didn't start from some place of reason and logic.
And that's very fair.
Yeah.
Even like you alluded to, even a bad idea may have come from a point of trying to come up with a good
Right.
idea to solve a problem.
And so, yeah, but I do think we kind of, that's, I think, why you see huge spikes in church attendance and things like that after catastrophic events when people realize they didn't have control.
Yeah.
Whether it be war or the Great Depression or things like that, when despite your greatest attempts at controlling the situation, you were shown that you didn't have any.
Right.
Then I think that's when you tend to see people embrace faith in something else. But as long as we're able to control our own thing, we tend to like to
Right.
we tend to lean into that, maybe to our own detriment.
Exactly.